Tares are busy. They're
Like peace and quiet.
right. You picture these neat, perfectly spaced rows of crops in rich, dark soil. You plant a seed, you water it, and it just grows.
Mm.
It's a very peaceful, almost passive image. But then, if you actually put your hands in the dirt, suddenly that peaceful image is completely shattered.
Yeah, it really is.
It is in reality a turf war down there. You're looking at this chaotic landscape.
Because the roots are tangled together beneath the surface in this constant, invisible struggle for survival.
Yeah.
It's anything but passive.
And that is exactly where we are starting today. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are getting our hands dirty.
We definitely are.
We have a stack of highly specific, incredibly powerful sermon notes designed for the Utasa Anglican community. And our mission today is to unpack this profound, deeply disruptive biblical metaphor from these notes.
The wheat and the tares.
Yes, the concept of the wheat and the tares. And we're going to explore how this specific community is being challenged to completely rethink their identity. I mean, they're being asked to step away from being, passive observers of a chaotic environment.
Right.
And instead embrace this radical identity as royalty, tasked with actively transforming their modern society.
It's a huge shift. And to understand the sheer weight of what is being asked of this community, we really have to look at the foundational texts driving this message.
Which are just fascinating.
They are. The notes don't just throw out a metaphor and leave it there. They draw on a highly specific progression of ancient scripture to build this entire psychological framework.
Right.
So they're pulling from Genesis 28, Psalm 139, Romans 8, and Matthew 13. And what's crucial here is that this isn't just an intellectual exercise in theology.
It's not just theory.
Exactly. It is a highly practical, urgent blueprint for modern community resilience. The goal is to take these ancient texts and use them as a mechanism to process the very real, very messy circumstances of today.
Okay, so I want to start by looking at that progression of text because the contrast set up in the source material is honestly staggering.
Yeah, it's a wild ride.
So the notes begin by grounding the community in Genesis 28 and Psalm 139. And when you look at those texts, they are all about this profound intentionality.
Right. Purpose.
Yeah, Genesis 28 is the story of Jacob waking up and realizing, surely the Lord is in this place and I was not aware of it. And then you pair that with Psalm 139, which is all about being deeply, intimately known by a creator before you were even born.
Those specific texts, they're chosen to establish a baseline of belonging.
Okay.
Because when you are standing in a chaotic environment, your first human instinct is to assume a mistake has been made.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I shouldn't be here.
Exactly. You think, I am not supposed to be here. This soil is bad. But by starting with Genesis and Psalms, the text is forcefully telling the community, you are not an accident.
Right.
The place you are standing, no matter how difficult it is known. You were planted here on purpose.
But see, this is where my brain gets stuck. Because if I'm planted intentionally, why is everything around me a disaster?
Right. The $1,000,000 question.
Yeah. And that brings us to the next two texts. And the tension here is just wild.
Oh, it really is.
Because on one hand, you have a text from Romans 8, which declares that the whole of creation is eagerly waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God.
Right. Creation holding its breath.
Yes. The notes specifically remind the community that creation is waiting for them to arrive and do something, like a superhero landing.
Yeah, totally.
But then immediately, you are hit with the reality of Matthew 13, which is that we don't live in a pristine garden. We live in a world, a field, full of tares or weeds. And the source is really explicit about this. These tares are busy. They are doing the works of the devil, actively manifesting evil.
And this is the central friction of the entire message. I mean, the community is being told that creation is waiting for them to act, but they are expected to act while literally tangled up with weeds that are actively working against them.
Okay, hold on. So let's unpack this. On one hand, you have creation essentially holding its breath, waiting for us to manifest.
Yeah.
But then you have this Matthew 13 reality where our roots are fighting for space. So it is the goal not to build a greenhouse.
A greenhouse.
Yeah, because every instinct I have when faced with an invading weed is to wall off my crops.
Oh, sure.
If I'm supposed to be this long-awaited force for good, my first thought is to retreat to a safe space, build a wall, protect my own nutrients.
Right. You want to isolate.
Exactly. I want out of the messy field.
Well, that instinct to retreat is exactly what the sermon notes are designed to dismantle.
Oh.
Yeah. The text synthesizes this tension by completely redefining what it means to be, in theological terms, co heirs with Christ.
Okay.
Now, let's break that phrase down because it's actually a piece of heavy legal jargon.
Co-heir?
Yeah. In Roman law, which is the context of the New Testament, being a co heir doesn't mean you are just, an employee on the estate who gets a nice bonus at the end of the year.
Right.
It means your name is literally on the deed. You hold ownership, authority, and ultimate responsibility for the property.
Oh, wow. Okay, so if you own the farm, you don't get to just abandon the field because a weed pops up.
Exactly. That's your field. The assumption many people make is that divine favor, or, spiritual royalty, means you get plucked out of the messy field and placed in that pristine greenhouse you mentioned.
Right, the VIP section.
Yeah, but the notes insist on the exact opposite. Being a co heir means you stay in the dirt.
You stay in the dirt.
Yes. The field of tares is the precise environment where you are meant to demonstrate your identity. The weight of creation in Romans 8, it's a call to step up and manage the property. It is a deployment order.
That is such a huge shift. And I mean, if you're listening to this right now, just think about your own office or your own family dynamic or your neighborhood. You probably have a tear. You have a situation or a person actively manifesting chaos in your day-to-day life.
Oh, we all do.
We all do.
Yeah.
And the natural reaction is to hide from them, to transfer departments or, I don't know, move to a new town.
Yeah, just escape.
Right. But this text is arguing that the chaotic environment is the exact stage where you are supposed to manifest your purpose.
It completely reframes the struggle. You're placed in a difficult environment not to be suffocated by it, but to overcome it.
Wow.
The question the notes pose to the community is very direct. They ask, in a world full of tares, how are we showing that we are co heirs with Christ?
Which brings us to the actual identity they're being asked to take on. And I have to say, this is where the notes get incredibly uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah, it pushes some buttons.
It really does. These sermon notes pull from Psalm 86 and the Gospel of St. John to make what I can only describe as a staggering theological claim. The direct quote from the source is, "You are gods, all of you, even though you will die as men, but you are gods."
It's a heavy quote.
It is. And because of this co-heirship, the community is being urged to show that they are kings. The Shona word used in the notes is vatangi. They're told to walk majestically and behave royally.
Right, and that word, vatangi, it carries immense cultural and historical weight.
Okay, tell me more about that.
In the Shona language, it translates to rulers, kings, or judges. It denotes ultimate authority in a domain.
Okay, wait. I'm stuck on this. Because here's where it gets really interesting, but also a bit risky.
Yeah.
If I go around telling people, hey, you are gods and you need to walk around like vatangi, that sounds like a recipe for massive cult-like arrogance.
Oh, sure. It sounds like an ego trip.
Yeah. Kings historically have servants. Kings conquer. If I start believing I am royalty in my office or my neighborhood, I'm going to become the absolute worst neighbor on the planet.
You're going to be a nightmare to work with.
Exactly. So how does a community avoid letting this concept of royalty completely go to their heads?
Well, it is a dangerous concept if you strip it of its context, which is why we have to look at the mechanism of how Psalm 86 is functioning here.
Right.
When the ancient texts refer to humans as gods, it is not suggesting they are, omnipotent creators of the universe shooting lightning bolts.
Thankfully.
Right.
Yeah.
It refers to the ancient Near Eastern concept of the divine council.
The divine council?
Yeah, basically stewards who are appointed to execute the will of the ultimate king. Your authority is delegated, it's not inherent to you.
Ah, okay. Hence the grounding phrase in the quote, even though you will die as men.
Yes, that phrase is the pin that pops the balloon of arrogance.
I love that.
You are still mortal, you still bleed, you still live in the muddy, weed-filled field. But we really have to look at why the notes are using the word vatangi in the first place.
Why use such a loaded term?
Think about the psychological impact of living in a field of tares. When you are constantly fighting for resources, facing chaos, and dealing with systemic problems, the natural human response is to adopt a victim mindset.
Yeah, you just feel helpless.
Exactly, you feel powerless.
You feel like things are happening to you rather than you having any control over them.
Spot on. So by calling a struggling
It provides some incredibly demanding metrics for how this majesty is supposed to behave on a random Tuesday.
Yeah, it brings this cosmic identity crashing down into hyperlocal practical ethics. The text asks directly, how are we managing the earth as stewards?
Right.
And then it outlines an accounting of how we treat very specific groups in society. It lists widows, orphans, workmates, neighbors, the church, and politicians.
Okay, so this list is wild to me. Kings historically have armies and servants. How does managing a spreadsheet with a toxic workmate or dealing with a local politician over a zoning law compute with a royal identity?
It's a huge disconnect from how we usually view royalty.
Right. It's essentially saying Your Majesty is measured by how you treat the office gossip or a deeply difficult neighbor who blasts music at 2 a.m. It's like discovering that being a king doesn't mean sitting on a throne wearing a crown. It means taking out the neighborhood trash
Yeah.
and breaking up a bitter fight at the water cooler.
That's a great analogy. And what's fascinating here is the complete lack of separation between the spiritual and the mundane.
Yeah, they're totally blended.
Right. And we modern humans love to compartmentalize. We put our spiritual identity in one box, our professional lives in another box, and our civic duties in a third.
Keep it all neat and tidy.
But the text insists that being a steward of the earth is proven precisely in the mundane friction of daily life. True majesty is ethical consistency under pressure.
Let's look at the spectrum of people on that list because it's
Mm.
definitely not random. You have widows and orphans on one end.
Right, the traditionally vulnerable.
Yeah.
These are people who, societally speaking, cannot easily repay you. Therefore, your treatment of them is a pure reflection of your character. A king who neglects the orphan is a tyrant, not a steward.
Oof, that's powerful. And then on the other end of the list, you have workmates and politicians. These are people who hold power or people with whom you are in direct competition. Honestly, these are the people who might actually be acting like tares in your life,
Oh, frequently.
actively trying to choke out your progress.
Exactly. And to behave royally toward a vulnerable orphan requires immense compassion.
Right.
But to behave royally toward a difficult politician or a toxic workmate requires a completely different skill set.
What does that look like?
It requires immense integrity, firm boundaries, and an absolute refusal to compromise your own ethics. The identity of a Tongi has to hold up under the pressure of both extremes. It demands that you do not let the behavior of the tares dictate your behavior as wheat.
That is the hardest part, isn't it?
Oh, without a doubt.
Because if someone at work plays dirty to get a promotion, the immediate human instinct is to play dirty right back.
Of course, fight fire with fire.
You want to use the tactics of the weed to beat the weed.
Yeah.
But the text is saying that the moment you adopt the tactics of the tear, you surrender your royal identity.
You lose what makes you wheat.
Right. You have to maintain your own nature regardless of the soil you were planted in.
And maintaining that ethical consistency is heavy. But it naturally builds into the final challenge presented in the sermon notes.
Okay, where does it lead?
Because being an ethical presence is only the baseline. The text issues a clear directive for this community to move from merely behaving well to actively fixing what is broken in the field.
Taking action.
Yes. The notes say, let's be people of prayer, people of the Bible, people of peace, and finally, people of solutions.
I really want to focus on that last phrase, people of solutions, because it completely destroys the modern trope of offering thoughts and prayers as an excuse to do absolutely nothing.
Oh, it dismantles it entirely.
Right. We see a tragedy or a systemic failure in our community, and it's so easy to just say, oh, I'm praying for that situation while remaining completely passive.
Scrolling past it.
Yeah. But the way this text pairs prayer directly with solutions tells me that the prayer is just the blueprint. It gives you the vision of what the building should look like, but you still have to put on a hard hat, mix the concrete, and build the house yourself.
That is such a critical point. You cannot just pray for the weeds to disappear if you aren't willing to get your hands dirty and uproot them.
Exactly.
And this is the absolute crux of the message. Remember, earlier in the notes, it describes the tares as being busy. They are busy doing the works of the devil.
Right. They aren't taking a day off.
The implication is profound. If the weeds are busy, the wheat must be busier.
Wow.
You cannot passively outgrow a weed that is actively trying to choke you.
Okay, so we have the identity of the Batongi,
Yeah.
we have the ethical boundaries of how we treat people, and we have the mandate to be people of solutions.
Mm-hmm.
But how does a community actually sustain that level of effort when the field is overwhelming? because burnout is real.
It is very real. And
Yeah.
the notes actually culminate in a specific Shona sentiment that acts as the psychological fuel for this entire endeavor.
Okay.
It's the phrase Hazvarambis Vakadaro.
Hazarabis Vakadaro. Meaning, it won't stay this way.
It won't stay this way. And let's look at the mechanism of how a phrase like this operates within a community.
Yeah, how does it function?
It is a linguistic shift that fundamentally rewires how people view reality. When you look at systemic corruption, poverty, or even just a severely broken relationship in your own family, the brain seeks to protect itself.
By accepting it.
Yes, by accepting the situation as a permanent reality. You tell yourself, this is just how things are.
Right, it's a defense mechanism against disappointment.
Exactly.
If I expect the field to always be full of weeds, I can't be heartbroken when my crops fail.
Spot on. But when a community adopts Hazvarambis Makadaro as a rallying cry, they are verbally rejecting the status quo.
They're pushing back.
It is dynamic, defiant hope. When the community is told they are royalty with agency and they are commanded to be people of solutions, this phrase becomes their theological mandate.
Mm.
It empowers the individual to realize they are the architects of the future in their own neighborhood.
It's essentially standing in the mud, looking at the chaos, and declaring, we see the messy field, we acknowledge the reality of the situation in our home, our community, our nation, but we refuse to accept that this is the final state of things.
Beautifully put. If a situation is broken, if there is injustice, if there is suffering among the widows or orphans, the royal response is to step into that mess
Yeah.
and declare through both prayer and hard practical work that it will not remain this way. The current struggle is a reality, but it is not a permanent fixture.
Man, this has been such an incredible journey through a relatively short but intensely packed set of notes.
There is just so much depth here.
There really is. To summarize where we've been today, we've seen how the Mitasa Anglican community is being challenged to view themselves not as victims of a weed-choked world,
Right.
but as intentional plantings, weed in the chaotic field. We've explored that radical mechanism of Psalm 86, calling them to embrace a shockingly bold royal identity as Vatangi.
Where their name is on the deed of the property.
Exactly. And we've seen how that majesty requires fierce stewardship, ethical consistency under extreme pressure, and this relentless commitment to being active problem solvers who refuse to accept the status quo.
And, if we bring this overarching message directly back to you, the listener, the questions posed in these notes transcend any single community or any specific religious tradition.
They really do. They're universal.
They apply to whatever field you find yourself planted in today.
Hmm.
So ask yourself, what role are you playing to make your own home, your own workplace, or your own nation a better place? How are you actively stewarding the exact environment you've been placed in despite the chaotic tares that might be growing right next to you?
It is a massive, incredibly uncomfortable challenge.
It really is.
And it brings us right to that image of the messy garden.
Mm.
We all have that expectation of tranquility, and we all get deeply frustrated when we find our hands in the dirt fighting turf wars we didn't ask for. But if the rallying cry of Hazvarambis Vakadaro, it won't stay this way, is actually true, it leaves us with something to deeply mull over.
Yeah.
What is the one tear, that one stubborn weed in your own personal life, your family dynamic, or your neighborhood
Mhm.
that you have been passively tolerating?
Mhm.
Assuming it was just a permanent fixture of the landscape, when in reality, you've had the royal authority to help uproot it all along.